Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Hallie Heeg, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
If this is your first time, thanks for checking it out. If it's not, thanks for coming back. My name's Tom Gentry. This is episode 72 of The Path to Authenticity, and it features a conversation with my friend, Hallie Heeg, who is a coach and an eating disorder expert living in London. We've been friends and colleagues for about 10 years, and she's someone for whom I have a ton of respect and is just about as sharp as anyone you're ever going to meet. So I actually had a listener who requested that I talk to someone who is an expert on eating disorders, and Hallie is the first person I thought of. We hadn't spoken for a long time before this conversation, and it was great to catch up with her. This was recorded a couple hours before George Floyd was murdered, and it just seems like God, so much has changed since then. It's been a whirlwind with all this craziness going on with the protests. For me, it's been heart-wrenching to watch. I don't understand why it's such a difficult thing for people to just look out for each other. And my favorite part of all this was a couple days ago when the mayor of Washington, D.C. had the words Black Lives Matter painted on the street leading to the White House. Just, to me, that's what being an American is all about. You know? Redress of grievances. That's what these protests are about. Redress of grievances. So anyway, I digress. Hope you enjoy it. It's a conversation with Hallie Heeg.
Just the product of bad seeds. Just
Hallie, it's so good to talk to you.
Hi. Yes, it's been too long.
Yeah. So you're in London.
I'm in London. I've been in London for a little over 4 years now.
Do you love it?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. It is. You know, I moved from sunny San Diego to, normally when I say this, rainy London. Mm-hmm. And London's a hard place, especially when you move here, when you didn't move here for a job, you didn't move here for school, you didn't move here and have kids. When you move here for a relationship, at an older age, where do you meet people?
Right.
You know, you could meet them at the gym, but I'm kind of there to do my workout. And I remember like honestly, Tom, the 6 months I was here, I was like, I'm just going to create a kindness campaign because it was going from San Diego where people are mindful and vulnerable. And there's a lot of, you know, open to having therapy and where London is, I'd ask someone how they're doing and it's fine. No one talks on the tube to each other. You don't make eye contact. There's rules, you know, what side of the escalator you stand on. And that was really hard for me. That you go to the grocery store and, you know, my family's from Dallas where everyone says hello and you go to the grocery store and no one asks, how are you? You ask them and they just, you know, if you talk to someone, they think you're either hitting on them or you're crazy. So it took a long time and I really had to find my tribe. And that took, I'd probably say about 1.5 years. And it was I had 1 foot in London and 1 foot out and I kept wanting to run home. And any chance I got, I just wanted to go home because that's where it was better. And that's where I was comfortable. And I really honestly always thought I was going to be this big girl that could live in a big city like New York and own it. And I really struggled the first year and a half to 2 years of being in London.
But you're at a point now where things have leveled out a little bit. You feel better about it?
Yeah. I mean, London is direct access to the world, and the conversations are so much more cultural here, right? Because it's a international hub. So the one thing I think I'll struggle moving back to the US is the conversations are about America, and that's great. But here it's, my son speaks German. He's 22 months old. He understands German. Right. He understands English, and he understands Spanish, and most of the schools you go to, the kids are speaking 3 languages. You go to the park and it's just constantly different languages. And I love that. I love just being around different cultures, different types of people, and just being able to get on a plane and within an hour, it's not like I get on a plane and San Diego to LA and nothing's really changed, or even San Diego to Kentucky and nothing's changed really. There's still the Targets, there's still the Walmarts, versus here they're speaking a different language in France, and they're speaking a different language in Spain, and there's different cultural rules. And so that's been really lovely. That direct access to the world has been amazing for me.
Sounds great. So I told you I had a listener who asked if I could speak to someone who is an expert on eating disorders. And you're the first person I thought of. First, because you are an expert on eating disorders, but also because you're very articulate,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So tell everybody what you do.
I think if I say what I do, I have to talk about where I am, why I do it, and where I come from. I
would love that.
I grew up as a pastor's kid, and my life was kind of seen through a glass house, and I was always having to put on a persona, making sure that we looked right and we spoke right, because my dad was running this church and it was a town. And so around 12 or 13, I was really struggling with adolescence, and there was girls that were starting to bully and jealousy. And I remember just going to my mom and dad and saying, I'm just having these emotions. I'm feeling scared and anxious. And my dad's response at the time was just go talk to God about it. Go pray about it. And I just didn't want a pastor at the time. I just wanted a dad just to validate me and validate feelings. And no one taught me about eating disorders. I just remember one day eating a bunch of food and sticking my finger down my throat, and all of this food came up. And I remember looking at it and I'm like, that's everything I'm holding on. Those are all the emotions. And it became this release mechanism, and it became this coping mechanism, like my blanket that I carried around. And it really helped me until it didn't anymore. And so, fast forward, I was an athlete. I was in honors classes, but I was really struggling with an eating disorder. And if I wanted to see a therapist, my dad would give me someone from the church. So I didn't really trust that what I said was really going to be held in confidence. I went to university, and I was smoking pot and still just really, really insecure and really struggling with low self-esteem, body image, comparing. And that kind of there was just this hole in me that really I was kept trying to fill. And I graduated from university and thought I was going to go save the world, and went to go work for a congressman in DC, because I thought if I could save other people, then I could avoid looking at my own stuff. And also being a pastor's kid, it was you save other people. So I had this savior mentality and never really didn't have to look at my own stuff if I was focusing on everyone else. So I would choose men to save. I would choose companies that were in distress that I could save, chose friendships that I could save, went to DC and thought I could save the world. Realized very quickly, Washington, D.C. is not where you save the world. And I came back and got into healthcare. And I was 24 at the time, and I got asked to be the executive director of assisted living and Alzheimer's facility. And you got to imagine this, Tom. It's an 84 unit kind of assisted living where all these old people live, right? And their ages from 65 to 90. And part of my job was they asked me to go live there. So I'm living there with these old people. I'm now smoking pot, drinking, binging and purging. And I am completely isolating, but I'm surrounding myself from geriatrics because they're safe. They love me. They think I'm amazing. And that was my life. You know, at 24 years old, I was afraid of women my own age, because they were just, I didn't trust them. And I'm just surrounded by old people and really just getting really sick. But I'm the executive director and I'm fully, functioning on the outside is what I thought. And, this went on and I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was just exhausted and I was just lonely. I was lonely. And, I remember going to, this big church in San Diego called Rock Recovery. It was called the Rock Church. And they had this line in the bulletin that said Rock Recovery. And I had no idea what that meant, but I was like, I need recovery. I don't even know what even that means. And I remember showing up and it was at a sober living and it was a 12-step Bible study for any type of addiction. And I remember going there and, it was the first time where I realized this is what church should be like. You had addicts, alcoholics, people addicted to porn, people who were in prison, and all these different types of people. And at the end, they all circled up and said the Lord's Prayer. And I'm like, gosh, I wish this is what church was like. This is who Jesus was hanging out with, the tax collectors and the prostitutes. And I really just felt like I finally belong. And me being, a person of faith and spirituality, that kind of became, I really had learned about a relationship with God there. And I remember I got a year of sobriety and I was seeing, I don't know if you remember Tom and Ann Martin, but they were at the Betty Ford Center and they would do couples work. And I went and did a couples program. I was dating a guy and we went and did one of their weekend programs. And Anne said, Hallie, let me tell you a story. She goes, congratulations on your 1 year. She goes, but I know a lady who's got 35 years of sobriety and every single day of her 35 years, she binges and purges. What kind of recovery do you want? Oh, and I knew I wasn't done. I mean, I was sober, but I was still binging and purging every day. And that really, I also then really had a soft spot for process addictions. Because drugs and alcohol, you either drink or you don't, but food, the very thing I struggle with, I have to have 3 times a day in order to survive. The sex addict, if you want to be in a healthy relationship, has to learn how to have sex in moderation. The gambler has to learn how to deal with money and they're much harder to treat. And, so that it took someone calling me out that I really respected to work on that. And I will say the first year I didn't like myself. Second year I didn't like myself. Third year recovery, kind of liked myself. Fourth year liked myself. Fifth, sixth, seventh, started to learn to love myself. 8, 9, started to learn I was enough. And I don't say that to discourage people. I say that because I had these negative messages in my head and I had this eating disorder since I was 13. It wasn't going to go away in 30 days. It wasn't going to go away in a year. The voices, the negative thoughts. It was a journey that I had to go on and I'm so grateful for it. And so through that, I noticed that people were going into meetings on Monday night, any type of 12-step meeting or smart recovery and saying they were fine. Throughout the week, their emotional status would change and they couldn't pick up the phone and say, I'm craving, I'm hurting, I'm struggling. And I saw people, I saw people dying. I saw people relapsing over and over again because of the shame. And they couldn't pick up the phone. And so myself and some colleagues, over the course, I don't even know if you know this, raised about 23 million and created OneHealth, which was a online software, kind of like Facebook at the time, that kept people in recovery longer from addictions and chronic diseases. And at the time, no one else was doing it. And I got to visit at about 250 treatment centers across the United States and UK. And Tom, you know, what's interesting, I could write a thesis on it. What I found was the organization's function, like the disease they treated. I started seeing treatment centers where there was codependency and enmeshment and staff splitting. And I thought, whatever I do one day, I want to really operate from a place of organizational health and really mean it, and emotional intelligence, and role model it. And not ask my team to do something I'm not willing to do myself, because you and I have seen so many organizations where they talk the talk of, you know, and, but you can see it throughout the team. They're not living that. And it starts becoming very unhealthy organization, because they're hiring people who are new in sobriety, being drivers, tech, who are sick themselves still. And, this industry is really, I got to make sure I'm doing my own work. You know, the best therapists I know are those who are continuing to do therapy. So did OneHealth, and then got asked by a private equity group to go and be the VP of eating disorder clinics, and really loved that. And then got asked by Hazel and Betty Ford to help open up an outpatient in San Diego, and fell in love with a German who lives in London, and paper, rock, scissors. I'm now in London.
Yeah. Wow. So couple things I want to go back to. You covered a lot there.
I know.
And we still haven't gotten to what you're doing now. But so throughout the years, you talked about how, you know, you still didn't love yourself early on, and it took years to get to a point where you loved yourself. Now, my experience was that when I was 30 days sober, I thought I felt great. When I was 90 days sober, I thought I felt great. When I was a year, it's gotten progressively better. It's always been better than it was. But now at 20 plus years, I look back at year one or the first 3 months and I was miserable.
Yeah.
So did you also think you felt good at the time, or did you know that you still weren't okay yet?
Oh no, same with you. Looking at it, it was better than where I was at, you know? So I was comparing it to my bottom. So yeah, every day was a little better, but take away all my coping mechanisms, and I had to sit with the uncomfortableness of being uncomfortable, and I had to actually figure out who I am. And that's what I had been numbing. And that was part of the eating disorder, was just numbing all those feelings, because I didn't like who I was. I wasn't okay with who I was. And again, I had a great family. No one ever told me you're not enough.
Right.
You know, that became the message and the tape for me, was I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, successful enough. You could tell me you love me 100 times. It wasn't 101. And so until I really worked on that piece, the I'm not enough, I was going to continue to keep trying to grab anything to fill that.
And then another thing I wanted to comment on is, because you and I have worked in these circles of addiction treatment facilities. And I think when you worked at OneHealth is about the time that we met. And, we've both seen tons of them. And when you talk about the dysfunction at these places, I mean, it exists. There's no doubt. But, when it functions in a healthy way, in a way that a recovering person who's getting better and living a principled life, when those are applied to an organization, it works really, really well. And I think in some ways, those organizations that you're talking about, that there's more dysfunction, they're not all that dissimilar from just a normal business. Right? I mean, there's a lot of dysfunction in corporate America. And I think I don't want to paint a picture of it's a terrible industry, I mean, I think when it's at its worst, it's a lot like other industries. And it's like other industries in that there's the good and there's the bad. And I know I've been lucky enough to be associated with the better providers and people. And part of that is because I've been intentional about it, like you have. Like I've aligned myself with people who did live by a set of principles.
So my husband works in private equity, and we always laugh. What type of person puts themselves through 120 hours a week, sleeps under their desk, puts themselves through that type of culture? And look, I see the culture. I see so many different cultures in the work I do. And I think it's not just the treatment industry. I think that's just what that's what I've worked in, right? For the last 15 years. What I find, whether it is investment banking, healthcare, hospitality, is the lack of emotional fitness, right? And emotional fitness is power, understanding, strength, and empathy around your mood and feelings towards yourself and others. And I think a lot of us, and I can struggle with that. Really, do I know my mood right now, my feelings towards myself and others, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and do I have enough emotional maturity, to find satisfaction in giving rather than receiving, and being able to create an environment where people don't feel fearful and anxious, but also being, the whole Brene Brown, being vulnerable and being vulnerable leaders. And I think that is just, look, I love the treatment industry because I love the things they've done. And I could list so many names right now of CEOs or people who've really mentored me. But I also know those people who mentored me, were people who are doing their own work, and had to work on it, and would take time out for people and would apologize. And it wasn't about the rip. It was going back and repairing, and would say, I'm sorry. And it was just, I learned, those are the people that I really am attracted to. Those servant leaders. Yeah. And that's where I see organizations thrive, when they have leaders like that.
This is why I wanted to have you on the podcast. That was awesome. Okay, so we've gotten you to London. So what are you doing? You're a mom. I know that.
Yeah, a mom. So I moved over, and thought I was going to do the same thing I was doing in the US, and realized there was a lot of gaps in care. And there was not a lot of PHP and IOP and full continuum of care programs. And so I just, look, it wasn't rocket science. I just took different ideas of programs that I'd seen in the US, and put together a business model for a PHP. And for those who don't know, a partial hospitalization program, and an intensive outpatient program for eating disorders for anorexics, bulimics, and binge eaters 16 and up. And Oxford was doing they had an entrepreneurship program. And so I applied and got accepted and did Oxford's entrepreneurship program. And to be honest, Tom, even there, I felt like I'm an imposter syndrome. They're going to find me out. They're going to realize I'm not smart and I shouldn't be here because I don't know what I'm doing here. But I knew I was an entrepreneur, and I knew I could sell myself as an entrepreneur because I knew how to do that. And at the end of the program, I ended up going out and raising $2 million to open up my own program, and got a team, got a building, and we were supposed to open August 2018. I found out I was pregnant, December, January, and decided to wait the first trimester because I'm a little older, and wanted to make sure that the baby was healthy, and then decided to disclose it to the investors, really thinking nothing of it, but just to say, hey, you guys, heads up, I'm going to have a baby, but that doesn't affect me as a CEO. And 5 months before opening, the investors pulled the funding, saying it was too risky to invest in a CEO who was pregnant. And that really, really changed my mood. And I would say I moved to London. I've been working on this project for 2 years. It was like I was birthing a company, and I was creating a company, and I was also creating a child. And there was a part of me that felt like I had lost a part of this company. And so to be honest, I was afraid I didn't want to attach to this child in me, because what if I lost him too? And a lot of people were talking miscarriages at the time. And so I thought, okay, well, if I don't attach, then I can't get hurt. And that was also a message I had growing up. If I don't attach, if I push you away, I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me. And so really struggled to attach with this child in me, because again, I'm afraid to lose it. And had him in August, had a boy, a very healthy boy in August of 2018, and thought, okay, well, I'm going to just go out and fundraise and do what I was planning on doing. And a week later, I get a call after I'd had the baby that my marketer, who really wanted to be the CEO and finance director and clinical director, thought it was such an amazing idea. They took the building, took the idea, and went out and raised funds, and they were going to open. And another hit, another blow. And I kept saying this never would have happened to me if I was in the US, and it was another reason why I didn't like London. I don't want to be here. See, this is what happens. Mm-hmm. And, had the baby, and then decided, okay, well, now what am I going to do? My identity, I don't want to be just a mom, and I don't want to be just a wife. Like, I kept rejecting, Tom, that notion that I'm just a mom and I'm just a wife. That wasn't enough for me. I needed to be the CEO. I needed the career. That is what I was used to. That was my identity. And that's what affirmed me and validated me. And no, this man isn't going to affirm and validate me. And, just being a mom, like I know my mom was, in my eyes, just a mom. And I always loved those women who were really ambitious and successful and was doing both. And that's what I wanted. And I couldn't do that. So I took a few months, and my husband was starting a new job, and we took this 8-week-old baby and we went traveling around the world, and people thought we were absolutely crazy. But it really allowed me to bond with him and allowed me to kind of get away and decide kind of what do I want to do now that I'm not doing this. And came back in 2019, and just the reason why I didn't open up another center was, you got to understand, the UK, 90% is National Health Services. The other 10% is private pay. So the private pay market is so small. So I had the company I created that was getting ready to open. And then now a German company came in that was kind of doing a similar model. And I'm like, there's not room for a third. So let me kind of sit back and just see what the market's doing. And in the meantime, I started getting calls from people just saying, hey, if you're doing anything right now, can you go to this intervention? If you're not doing anything right now, I have this eating disorder. This girl, can you coach? Can you do some case management? And look, it allowed me to be able to work, but also be able to be there for my son. And one of the things, I had this epiphany where I had an 11-year-old eating disorder client, and my son was about 6 months at the time, and I had to go to the hospital with this boy. He was really ill. And I sat probably for 10 hours in this ER. Parents were, in another city, and my son was homesick. And I kept thinking, I'm basically choosing to be with this client in a hospital when I have my own son at home, but this is what my ego is saying, is you need to work. And that was really great for me. And I started realizing kind of what every human needs, right? Is to feel seen, heard, and understood and valued. And from that day on, I kept saying, how do I do this to my son? How do I make sure he feels seen, heard, and valued? And how do I also make sure that I show it with congruency? That if I tell him he's enough, I believe it myself. And look, we either parent the way that our parents parent us, or we parent the way that we wish we were parented. And I think I'm a mixture of both. But so right now I'm doing coaching, I'm doing consulting, doing some interventions, predominantly eating disorders. And I really like it. And it allows me, like I said, to be able to be there for my son. And on be there also and kind of get my career filled up. And one thing I'll say is Michelle Obama said, you can have it all, but not at the same time. And I kept thinking I could have it all, and I realized looking back, I would have just birthed my son and then opened up this center. And you and I know, look, being the CEO and running a PHP and IOP, that's not a 9-to-5 job. My husband was traveling, so my son would be raised by probably a nanny, and I'd come home. He'd probably see me for 2 hours. And that's fine for some people. And that's what I thought I was going to do. And God had other plans. So I've also, what's interesting is I really struggled with forgiveness, with those people. And I started just praying for them. And it became this, when people would say, hey, they'd mention the name and they'd say, I refer people there, and they wouldn't know I was associated because they switched the name. And they're like, they're doing really great. And I really like them. I started realizing, you know what, maybe my whole role was just a visionary to vision it. But it doesn't mean that I'm not helping other people's lives. And there's this great quote that says, plant trees under someone's shade you may never sit. And what I realized was this was allowing me to plant a tree, and I might never sit under it or run it, but other people will. And it allowed me to feel like I was still making a difference in people's lives. And it allowed me to also, my ego, do I have to be the CEO in order to make a difference and be a leader? Or can I lead by creating things and allowing other people to execute it and then walk away?
See, to me, that's the awesome part. The part that you did. That's the kind of stuff that gets me excited. Ideas and new projects and stuff like that. And of course, I mean, you did it. You're still, nobody can take that away from you. You still created it.
Yeah, look, I struggled to put it on my CV, but it's more of, what is it about me that needs to be seen versus how can I just put that out there and someone else might get credit for it? And how can I be okay with that, knowing that other people are getting better because of an idea that I created? And that's the work I keep doing, right? What is it about me? I used to want to be the biggest person in the room. How now do I go in and be the smallest, and not smallest in terms of self-esteem, but smallest in terms of I'm okay to sit here. My ego is, I'm totally secure sitting here if I'm not seen. And that I was not there early in recovery. And I think that also goes to the work of knowing my worth and value. And sometimes it's shaken, but getting more solid in that.
Yeah, because, there's really no way of getting around the fact that addiction, process addiction, substance addiction, it's really, what's lacking is self-love. And, it's a ruptured relationship with oneself. That's what it is. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, because, that congruence of, being who I am and being who I want to be, as opposed to, like for you, it was, how am I seen, or how can I be seen? And for me, it was accepted either by family or look like the good guy. A lot of times it was, that sort of image thing. I want to seem like, I'm the good guy, helping people and all that stuff. It's all outside of ourselves. And we get attached to this stuff. It's not that's not what it's really about. What it's about is how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
Not how other people feel about us.
Yeah. And someone said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. I think we for me, I had this idea: leader equaled CEO, leader equaled executive director, leader equaled whatever that story was in my head. And we're all leaders, if our actions inspire others to dream more, if we come alongside and coach people and encourage them to be their best selves, that's leading right there. We lead as parents, we lead as siblings, we lead on teams. And, for me, it's learning that there are different definitions to certain words versus the rules. I made up my own rules, and that was my playbook. So starting to really unravel my old rules, my family's core values, my family's rules, my family's narrative, my family's messages, and really create one that really helps me to be the best version of myself.
Yeah, that's been big for me over the last few years. And a clear example of it that I use is I used to feel so guilty about sleeping in on a Saturday. And I mean like till 9 or 9:30, not like noon. And it was those voices from my childhood, which were good, like helpful in, getting me into a good routine as a kid and being motivated. But as a 40-something adult who is making ends meet and raising a son and doing okay in life, I don't have to feel ashamed of myself. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so then it kind of got me to start looking at, well, what are the other rules in my life that I've created for myself? And one of them was 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
That's a big one that a lot of people, and one of the things I love about this whole pandemic, it's an opportunity for us to redefine ourselves and really live in a way that we want to live. And businesses are changing in real time as a result of this.
Yeah.
There are opportunities that existed for me before this all happened that don't anymore. But, they weren't what I needed anyway. It wasn't really where I wanted to go anyway. And the new opportunities that have come from it, not the least of which is suddenly everybody has time to do what we're doing right now, which was harder for me to get done before. And I went from having 1 episode a week to 2, which was a goal of mine, by this spring to get that done. And I was able to do that, and devote more creative energy to this. And, I think I told you about the men's, series that I'm doing. And, a lot of it speaks to, the perspective we take on things is really, really important. If we look at something like it's a problem, then we're going to find a reason why it is. And that's what it's going to be. But if we look for opportunities and look for the good in people, what we focus on enlarges, So,
well, and these are unprecedented times, but it's not the only crisis we will go through, and there's some people who are going through this crisis in a crisis. There's a lot of, if you go back to eating disorders feeds on isolation, and so you have a lot of people who are isolating right now and binging and purging. And great, here the government says all I can do is go, for us right now in the UK, we're allowed to go outside to exercise, to go grocery shopping, or to go to the pharmacy. That's it, right? So you have a lot of people who are over-exercising right now. You have a lot of people who can't go to a gym, and so they're really struggling, and they're binging a lot. And so, there's a lot of people who are going through eating disorders here. The calls, it's 30, the call centers in the eating disorder areas are 30% up. Anxiety, depression is up. And so I just see, this isn't the only crisis we're going to go through. And some of us were in a crisis before we even got into this, and that crisis just kind of carried over. And I feel like some people are just holding on, barely holding on.
Yeah.
And we need to hold space, for people's reactions. And I think for me, I was quick to judge, or I started getting annoyed when people started talking about in online virtual meetings, about they can't get X amount of foods or certain things. And it was like, oh my goodness, seriously? Like, we have people dying. But the reality is I had to really go through the comparable suffering, right?
Right.
And just because what I'm going through, and someone else is going through doesn't still mean that it isn't a big deal to them, even
Right.
though COVID and we can't see our family, we can't hug people. It doesn't mean I had to really learn that my comparable suffering to not take away from whatever everyone else was going through. It does not give me the right to judge their process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that really saddens me about it is the families who are losing people and they can't grieve together.
Yeah.
The funerals that aren't taking place. That because we're, as a culture, so bad at grieving anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of wounds that are resulting from this. But it goes back to, where can I help? What can I do? And you're finding a way, right?
Yeah, through this, I'm doing a lot more virtual groups. I've found a lot more virtual groups, a lot more virtual coaching, a lot more organizations who don't know how to pivot from what their organization was like to now moving things digitally, moving everything online. And you have a lot of people who don't know how to do that. And so myself, being in marketing and knowing how to digital marketing and being able to do some consulting for that. There's so many entrepreneurs. I mean, we're going to be birthing some really amazing new, not even ideas, but there's going to be some amazing concepts and companies coming out of this. Creativity is just birthing at the stream. And, I really, for someone like myself being an extrovert, this has been extremely painful. I always tell people, I'm like, I didn't plan on being in lockdown for almost 3 months with my husband and my 21-month-old. I'm ready to switch houses. When do we get to rotate? I'm ready. I'm ready to go be in a girl's house with all girls. But it's really gone back to why am I struggling with boredom? Why am I struggling with things going slow? Why do I need it to go very quickly, fast pace? What is in the waiting? What is in just being patient and really allowing myself to get mindful, to really connect with God, and it's been really difficult. It's been very, very painful, but it's been an amazing process of, if I'm not doing, and it's the thing I tell people all the time, like, if you don't do anything today, you're still enough. And it was something I had to go back and almost recoach myself during this process of, if you just show up today, but you don't do anything else, you're still enough. You're still okay just the way that you are. So it's been a recoaching for myself.
Yeah, I've gone through a little bit of that too, where just getting caught up in the idea of, I have all this time at home, I should be achieving these goals. And, when, this disruption in our lives is traumatic in and of itself. It's a difficult thing to go through for anyone who's not sick. Right?
Yeah.
And then for me, the political parts of it have just been, an emotional roller coaster that I have gotten on and off of sporadically since the beginning of this. And right now I'm mostly off of it and just, kind of loosely paying attention to what's going on. But I get really upset about all that stuff. I care, I care about where all this is going. But I guess for me, I just go back to, I really believe we're all inherently good and love will win. I mean, that's what will win no matter what. And it's gonna be okay. It really is. So now tell me about the company. Is it your company what is it? WeRise.
Yeah. So, I have just found some amazing, women. So it's really a bespoke. So we kind of go in to and work with people who they might not want to go to treatment. They might have gone to treatment. And so we go into people's homes and we'll do meal support and we'll settle on people who just need support just with being discharged and need support with eating disorders. We go and do coaching. We do experiential work. And then we have therapists, psychiatrists. So I get a call and we will just put a team together because I love treatment, but also I can't stay in it. Look, every time I try to go to on-site once a year. Every time I go, I'm like, I don't want to leave, and I love at the end of it, they're like, you have to leave. Like there's a reason why I love it's like 6.5 days. It's like, I know you want to stay here, but you can't. And so I think people get to treatment. They want to stay, one, because they feel good. They're getting better. They have people who are caring for them, loving on them. You're getting people food, cleaning, all of that. And going back to trauma and going back to people who are triggering you, but that's really where the work happens. And that's where you've got to practice it. And so for me, it's been great to be able to work with people in their environment and in their home and say, look, what's triggering you and how do we really work through it? And that's been really, really great. And I love doing that. I love that work.
Well, and this is, for me, one of the things coming from this pandemic and in this industry specifically is, the outcomes have never been that great.
Yeah.
And this is forcing the industry to like move into this century and do things that they were reluctant to do before. And with payers being the way they are, what you're describing, I think, is more and more what this kind of care is going to become. And it probably should, because you're right. The work really does happen in real time in your life. I mean, treatment is a great education. And, if it was really great, you've learned what you need to know, including what my issues are and what I need to work on when I leave. It's not like stuff's getting worked out there. Like that's what families presume and what they hope for, but that's not really, the work is when you leave.
Yeah.
So I think it's awesome what you're doing. And also it's humane to look at a person and say, what does this person need? What does this family need to get better? And then orchestrating it. We all deserve to have that kind of, I wish we all could have, like, all the people who need help with addictions could have that kind of care, because that's really what needs to happen.
Well, yeah. And, for me, my outer world is really about my inner world. And so how do I really practice, really being in my inner world, and whatever I'm working on, again, that will play out in the bigger world. But I've got to really learn, how to take care of myself and how to, I also, look, I see coaches. I see people using coaches a lot more. If you think about athletes, I just watched the Michael Jordan, oh my gosh, documentary. And, we'll get a personal trainer, we'll get a coach, we'll get someone if we want to lose weight for meal support. People have shopping coach. I mean, there's so many different types of coaches, and there's something different. I love therapists. I love therapy. There's also something different between a therapist and a coach, And when I talk to my coach, I really believe he really thinks I'm amazing and great and really speaks that into me. And sometimes therapists just can't do that. Right. And so for me, I keep going back to whether I should go get my degree and then where would I practice. And I kind of like being able to operate outside of some of not the boundaries, the lines of this box and just tell people, you are amazing. You are so worthy and deserving of greatness. We all are. And that's the one thing I tell people is like, don't count yourself out this early. You're still so many things you don't even know you are yet. Who you are hasn't necessarily been determined yet. Don't count yourself out of the race yet. And really being able to coach people. And every time I do it, look, I'm also telling my inner child the same thing.
Right.
It's really what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know. We're healing
it's telling
ourselves.
that 13-year-old, what she really wanted to hear from her dad and from her mom and from other people. That's exactly what I feel like I do with clients, selfishly or unselfishly. And it's what I get to do with my son every day too, is tell him all the affirmations of who he is. Cause I'm also telling that little girl who she is. Cause she needs to remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, nothing will teach you more than being a parent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been such an amazing experience for me. I mean, even in this moment, and some of the lessons are and have been really, really hard. But something that I share with people that a therapist told me at one point when I was talking about how, we get triggered with our kids. I mean, it just happens.
Yeah.
We can't, but once we're aware of it, we can do something with it. And my reaction was to so many times do something other than what my parents would have done.
Yeah.
And she said to me, not being them isn't the same as being you. And, we can, if we don't do our own work and we don't heal, we can easily become not someone else rather than me, and being really connected to who we are. But often, if we stay hung up in our issues, like we're more worried about who we are not instead of really owning who we are and that divinity that I believe we all have, that spark within us, that we all have our own unique gift to share with the world. So,
and not apologizing for it. Right. I mean, my mom used to say, just, I'm a very strong personality when I was younger. Like, look, if someone kidnaps you, they're going to bring you back, and I laugh about that, but she's, there were so many times that I tried to hide my light, in order to make my sister feel better, my siblings or other people. And I started realizing, like, I'm not going to hide it anymore. Like, it wasn't meant to be, the Nelson Mandela, or, it wasn't, our light is meant to shine, and it's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And if you think of the 5 freedoms for children, right? It's the power to perceive, the power to think and interpret, the power to feel, the power to want and choose, and the power to imagine. Those are the 5 freedoms. And I think about that and I'm like, that's 5 freedoms for adults. That's 5 freedoms for everyone. Don't we all want the power to feel? We want the power to have permission to tap into our hearts. We want the power to want and choose. I want those freedoms, we should all want those freedoms. And so it's, for me with him and just with everyone, I love, as much as I don't have as much energy being an older mom, I'm so much wiser. And I know I parent differently than I would have in my 30s. I mean, look, I'm going to be 41 and my son's, 22 months old. I'm so grateful for the wisdom I have.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm so grateful.
Yeah. I've thought about that a number of times during this conversation because, sometimes we get so hung up in what's happening right now that we lose our point of reference, that this is just a moment in time and my life's going to be completely different in a year from now. So I don't really need to get that emotionally hung up on what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And age is what really, sometimes we just feel like we have to do everything right now because, and really it's not like that. Like we're better if we relax.
Yeah.
Just enjoy all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
Well, if you ever want to have a conversation about what it's like to grow up with a mom in her 40s, all because I'm the youngest of 8,
Yeah.
my mom was 43 when I was born. So that was interesting. But, so eating disorders for someone who's struggling, what would you say if someone is struggling with anorexia, bulimia, what would you tell them right now?
You're not alone. You're definitely not alone. And I would say the recovery looks different for everyone, and it's a process. And I would say don't do it alone, because that's really what the eating disorder wants. And to really reach out to, there's free resources and, there's resources that you can pay for. But really getting, I would say, if you can get a therapist or a coach, get into some sort of fellowship whether that's Eating Disorders Anonymous, Anorexics and Bulimics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. There's some great programs virtually now. I mean, there's a meeting, it seems like every couple of hours now. And that to me was big, not feeling like I was the only one struggling with this gigantic thing that I had shame with. And I always tell people the difference between shame and guilt. Shame is there's something wrong with me, and guilt is I'm doing something wrong. And a lot of times people say guilt, but it's really they're saying something's wrong with me. And look, nothing's wrong with you. The thing is this has been a coping mechanism. This has been a blanket that's probably protected so many women from sexual abuse, physical abuse, and men from bullying, from trauma, from, super high expectations of oneself, and they don't have any other coping skills except for this. This is the one, and there's some people who feel so out of control in their lives, or their parents control every aspect, that this is the one thing they're like, nope, I'm going to control this. You can't, I get to control this. And so letting them know, look, you think you're controlling it, but it's controlling you. It is. And it's going to take time to heal, but you don't have to do it, and you don't have to stay there alone. And so I think first of all, it's realizing it's so brave saying I need help, asking for help. And then it's finding the right people and the right resources. And look, if someone's struggling, they can reach out to you, and I'm happy to give them, some resources. You can put resources on your website, whatever you need. There's an amazing book I give everyone, even parents, called Life Without Ed. And it's a great book by Jenny Schaefer. And it just talks about ED, which is ED, eating disorder, and really giving it a name, and saying, this is Ed. Ed's a bully. And that really helped me to separate myself from the eating disorder and really start realizing I need to divorce my eating disorder. I need to break up with my eating disorder. I need to let, and being able to separate myself from it was really powerful for me.
Okay. So what would you say to the young woman who has been stable in recovery from her eating disorder and wants to do something to give back?
Oh my goodness. I get that all the time, where people just are like, I love this. If you feel like you want to be a therapist, then do it. If you feel like you want to be a coach, then get the certifications. If you want to start a meeting, start a fellowship meeting. There are so many people who need meetings in so many rural areas where they can't find one. I mean, I think there's so many AA meetings and NA meetings. But finding an eating disorder one is still difficult and challenging. And I would say, contact a local chapter and set one up, set up a nonprofit and run your own group. If you're in a good place, start talking about it, because I started attracting people because I was vulnerable and because I was honest about it. And it's still something people don't talk very publicly about with eating disorders. You have a lot of, I'd say, not I'm saying Russell Brand, but there's celebrities out there who are in recovery from drugs and alcohol. It's still hard to find the eating disorder people. And so be that person who says, look, what I always tell people is I survived. I didn't become my worst fear. I didn't become obese. I didn't explode. My worst nightmares never came true. I still eat 3 meals a day. I work out. I can eat the foods that I thought I never could. And you know what? My life's pretty amazing. And nothing really changed body-wise for me, honestly. Everything changed mentally for me and how I felt about myself. And so I would say, if you're okay with it, be vulnerable, be authentic, start telling your story. Whether it's on a platform, whether it's on social media, on a blog, just start, because there's someone somewhere that you never know that needs to hear that message of hope.
All right. So the younger Hallie who was struggling, what would you say to her?
Oh, wow. I would say, Hallie, when you numb all the pain, you numb all the good too, and you're trying to numb the pain, but you're also numbing the good parts. And you're going to get through this. You will. But don't give up on yourself. You're worth fighting for. And I'm sorry, that you didn't feel affirmed and you didn't feel loved and you didn't feel validated. And all of your emotions and all of your feelings are completely valid. And I hear you and I see you and I understand you. There is someone here that sees you. So don't give up. And you are deeply loved. I just needed to know that. I needed to know I was deeply loved and that I was okay just the way I was. I wasn't broken. I just had some issues and I didn't know how to cope with it, but you get through it. And owning your story now, it can be hard, but it's not nearly as hard as spending your life running from it. So don't run, and those girls you never become, those girls that you really cared about in high school that were mean to you, you're not friends with them ever. After high school, you never see them again.
Want to be.
And those girls who kind of were the tapes, you're not even friends with them. You have amazing friends who, you've met from all over the world. So those girls who made such an impact on you from 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, you never see them again, ever. And so don't let 1 year of junior high or high school define you. You're more than that. You're more than just a year or 2 years. You're more than that. And I think we think at that age, this is this is life. This is all there is. And of course you don't know any better, but gosh, things get so much better. There's such a bigger world out there than 13.
Hallie, this has been great. It's been so good catching up with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been too long since we've connected, so thank you. It's been a real gift.
All right, there you go. Hallie Heeg, WeRise Solutions. You can learn more about Hallie and her company at werise.co.uk. There will be a link in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or a rating at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Something new, I set up a voicemail account. So if you want to call and leave a comment, ask a question, just know that anything you leave on the voicemail, unless you state otherwise, you're giving me permission to use it on the show. That number is 561-247-4757. Again, 561-247-4757. You can email the show at thepathtoauthenticity@gmail.com. Definitely want to hear from you. Been doing some Instagram lives, 3 p.m. Eastern on Sundays. So if you want to check that out, been doing that with my buddy Ed Tilton, who is working with me on the Getting Real About Manhood episodes. You can follow the show on Instagram and like us on Facebook, both at The Path to Authenticity. We have some playlists on Spotify. Try to update the Sunday playlist every week. Just feature music that I like or whatever mood I'm in at that particular time. You can find the show on Patreon, where by becoming a patron, you can gain early access to episodes as well as supplemental content. The music I used in the show, the opening, it's called Happy Song by a band called Pachyderm. The other songs, there's one called The Road and another one at the end called Guitar Lessons by a band by the name of Punk Rock Opera in LA. Both used by permission under a Creative Commons license. So thanks again for checking out the show. Hope you come back. Got some great stuff coming up. So enjoy your week. Thanks for listening. Be nice.
did great, honeybee.
The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com.